Hi everyone, and welcome back to Plan First Live. Today's topic is it better to rebuild or to renovate? I have bought a house which is in a neighborhood where over time your neighbors have all rebuilt, and they've rebuilt houses that have really elevated the value of the neighborhood. So in an instance like that, it might be worth your while to actually rebuild as opposed to renovating, so they can maximize the value of the property that you have. Secondly, is your neighborhood. Are you close to schools? Have you got friends that live in the neighborhood? Is there a sense of community where you really feel that you belong? You would want to be located close to public transport, train stations, buses, etc. And of course, shopping malls. Have a look at the finances as well, because firstly, before you make the decision, have all the financial facts on the table. And it wouldn't necessarily just be the cost of the actual renovation or rebuild. You've got to consider factors like, if you're going to renovate, if it's a major renovation, you would need to move out of the house. And of course, you'd have to pay for that accommodation over that period of time. Renovation generally will add massive value to the house, especially if you're doing new kitchens, new bathrooms, etc. With renovation, you're going to be doing a greener option because you are going to be retaining the materials that you've currently got. But with rebuilding, you can maximize your energy efficiency, really reduce your energy costs every month. Weigh up all the factors, have all the information on the table before you even think of making a choice, and speak to the experts.
In terms of weighing up whether rebuild or whether renovate, by adding a second story onto an existing house means you're actually opening up the house and exposing it to the weather. And what that implies is that you're going to actually have about $50,000 additional scaffolding, and effectively you're going to wrap the house. You know, people, the viewers will have seen those homes. We literally see these enormous structures that are encased in white plastic. The other thing is, like a deck of cards, if you're going to add on top of a house, you're going to end up creating quite a significant amount of damage to the existing house downstairs. You're actually destroying the floors, the walls, to basically create stronger foundation. And that can be a cost in the vicinity of $200,000. You're not going to incur that when you're building new. So where I'm heading with that is, regardless of the scale of the renovation to build a second story, you're going to incur about potentially $250,000. This is on a relatively small second story of only about 50 square meters. And the reason I want to use this as an example is that additional cost compared to building new is about $5,000 per square meter. So to do a second story extension, you're in a situation where the build cost is costing about $10,000 plus per square meter compared to new. And that's why with that additional $250,000 spend, sometimes from the consulting we do early on in projects, the decision is made to go and just buy a bigger house. I believe the value in this house is actually in the foundations and the retaining walls and not having to rebuild them. And that's why I wanted to give an example here that this is effectively an approximately $1 million project at the time when we built it. 40% of the cost, had we rebuilt this, would have gone into about a $400,000 spend in rebuilding the garage and the elements that are actually embedded into the landscape. And that's why we're seeing on newer projects where there's actually a more affordable economies of scale to, in fact, upfront spend a bigger cost on flattening the land so you can build a flat concrete slab to eliminate or actually lower that 40% cost up front. The owner was quite highly distress through this project. When we actually started demolishing this house, in the sense that there's very little left in the house, and I had to basically reassure them there's quite a lot left in the house, which was the lower floors, the garaging, all the infrastructure foundations that if this was to be rebuilt, it would have incurred a $400,000 rebuild to get to the same level of elements that are actually below the floor.
If you look at the electricals and the plumbing, those are not things that you see, but it is cost that gets incurred.
And that's where you have to make the economic decision as to whether to rebuild or to basically renovate.
That's why it's so important, I think, to get the full picture and to get a proper cost estimate before making the decision.
A true renovation expert is very different to somebody that is only familiar with effectively designing properties that are on a flat piece of property.
Well, if I look at New Zealand as an example, asbestos needs to be considered. If you do have asbestos and you're doing a renovation, that needs to be removed by specialists potentially.
Correct. The regulations changed some 10 years ago to become more stringent on that. And I suspect they changed the rules for the fact that a lot of people were trying to circumnavigate that as a cost. And so it was obviously becoming a health and safety risk.
What's the very first thing a homeowner should consider when deciding between rebuilding or renovating?
Economics. Simple. As I mentioned, second stories, a $250,000 infrastructure cost. It actually economically ended up becoming a very successful project because there were neighbouring properties that had values to basically reflect the cost of the project.
I would say economics and also emotion. How does the age or style of a home influence the decision?
There are so many factors to it, but the character homes that we've renovated rather than demolished, there's so much intrinsic value. I often think, was that really worth it? And the answer is yes.
What structural issues usually tip the scale towards rebuilding? I would say foundations is the major one.
And I think my second case study where I made that very clear point, what happens below the floor is about 40% of the cost, especially on a hillside.
Also, if you look at structure, it could also be, if we spoke about this, it could have been last week or the week before, if you're making an open plan home, you still need to retain a certain amount of structure, to support and to create bracing for the home.
It's absolutely paramount, not just to pick a builder that's a referral because it's somebody's relative, or they effectively did a bathroom renovation that turned out well.
I think often people think that they will save money by going with somebody they know or the cheaper option. But at the end of the day, it actually then would potentially cost them more because the person's not a specialist and they're not familiar with renovations per se. How can homeowners make sure their decisions add long-term value? Now, my answer to that would be consult an estate agent and see what the value of the houses are in the area.
I have to agree with it, and it's not always good news. It's one of the reasons we encourage an early consultation.
I think it's our responsibility as designers to give them honest opinion and honest advice, and then they can make their decisions from that.
I couldn't agree more. You have to give them honest advice, transparent advice.
I think our time for this week, next week's topic, we're going to be talking about how to design for privacy without losing light. A website and 0800 number details are on the screen. You're also welcome to reach out through Facebook and follow our Instagram. And we look forward to seeing you all again next week.